Hello everyone, welcome to Sunya IAS and welcome to this lecture. In today's lecture of mains article discussion, we are going to discuss a very important topic from which you can get question directly also, and this example can be used at various places in various kind of questions that are asked. As you can see on the board, the topic is EWS quota. What is EWS? Economically weaker section, right? Economically weaker section quota. Now, very controversial topic, very important topic, and now even the Supreme Court has said that this economically weaker section reservation is actually constitutionally valid, right? There are some Supreme Court judgments which are very highly anticipated, that what the Supreme Court is going to say on that, right? So for example, Ayodhya judgment was one of those. The electoral bond is one of those as of now. So multiple things where Supreme Court's approval matters a lot. And this EWS quota was there in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has declared it constitutionally valid. So there is no doubt about the fact that within the unreserved category today, we have 10% reservation for the people who are from economically weaker section. This is clear. Now from your exam point of view, please make a note on where all this topic can be useful to you. First of all, as I always tell you, because you ask about where are the notes that you can get, where can you get the PDF. So I always tell you there are two ways for you to get the material for this particular aspect. If we talk about notes, one option for you is that you go for the Shunya books, right? The Shunya books of GS 1, 2, 3 and 4. So for example, the EWS topic, you will find in Shunya GS 2 book, right? You can order those. One is, if you don't want to order for some reason, or if you think handwritten notes go better for you, go for handwritten notes and make those notes from the class itself, right? The PDFs for these will not be available class by class. Okay, so either you go for handwritten or you go for the Shunya books. When you go for handwritten, you make sure that you index your notes properly. So if you're making notes from this particular class, you have to place them in the GS2 module that you are making. Tomorrow, if we are talking about some social issue, some issue related to geography, which is in the current affairs, you have to put it in GS1. Similarly with economy, GS3, right? So make sure that you index. So handwritten is there, or Shunya books, which can be used. Now, when we talk about EWS reservation, most people would say that it is applicable only for GS2, that is polity and governance. It is definitely the most important aspect, right? But even in GS1, if you get a question about Indian society, right? About Indian society and caste-based reservation, and caste overall a factor, and what are we doing to reduce caste as a factor, right? You can use this example that the EWS reservation through 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act has been enacted to shift the reservation, arena of reservation from caste to class, right? So even in society, on the basis of caste, you can use this example. Similarly, if you're talking about poverty in GS3, so most people would just go on writing the names of schemes, writing the poverty ratio, all of it, which becomes very important. But when you talk about measures taken, people's minds generally don't go towards the policy aspect of it, the constitutional amendment aspect of it. So 103rd Constitutional Amendment is very, very important for poverty alleviation as well. right? The fact that we are choosing the weakest, economically the weakest section of the society and giving them affirmative action, giving them reservation, means that we are trying to improve their social structure, helping them to get out of poverty in so many ways. And this is also a criticism, we'll talk about it, that reservation, is it a poverty alleviation program? About when we talk about reservation, is reservation a poverty alleviation program, or is it a social justice program, right? So we'll talk about all of this, a very important topic. So let's start with it. Start making your notes if you wish to. Okay, so overall, if we talk about the background, since our independence, right? Since our independence and since the time we became a republic, when did we become a republic? We became a republic when we adopted, enacted, and gave to ourselves our constitution. However, the Republic Day is when we enforced the constitution, right? That is 26 Jan 1950. However, our constitution was ready on 26 November 1949, right? Which becomes the Constitution Day. So on this 26th November 1949, within this, since the beginning of our journey as a sovereign socialist democratic republic, we made it a point that we want to acknowledge the caste based discrimination, right? But we also knew that this caste based discrimination will never be permanent. Now that is a different reality, that it has been 75 years and this caste based discrimination is still going on, and the affirmative action also, the reservation also is still going on. But the envisaged purpose was that from caste we will move on to class, right? And if you see, even in OBC reservation, other backward classes reservation, we have a creamy layer which is restricting the benefits of reservation from being given to the most advantageous section. So my point is that we did not acknowledge in our constitution backwardness based on economic stature. We only acknowledge the backwardness based on caste, right? So now this revolutionary step that has been taken through the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act, it is basically you can note this down, and this should be there in every reservation related answer of yours, which is asking directly about the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act. So you can start by writing that the Government of India gave 10% reservation to the economically weaker section of the unreserved category through 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act, transitioning from caste based reservation to class based reservation. Okay, so this is the first feature. Now in this, it is very important to know what exactly has been amended, right? When there is a constitutional amendment, you need to know the articles, and especially when this constitutional amendment has been challenged in the Supreme Court, you need to know the articles which were amended. So there were two articles, please note this down, Article 15 and Article 16, which were amended. Now Article 15 clause 6 was added and Article 16 clause 6 was added. So in both, clause 6 was added to both of them. So this is easy to remember. Okay. 15 clause 6 reserves 10% of the seats in educational institutions. Now please understand, this is public educational institutions. Please understand here that under right to education, some people have this doubt, that under right to education, there is already 25% reservation for the EWS category, right? under right to education, there is already 25% reservation. So be it public school or private school, 1/4 of the seats have to be there for the EWS category. However, that is just for class, for people, for children from 6 to 14 years of age, right? 6 to 14 years of age. And this is a very restricted category. So here, when we have given reservation to EWS category students, we have also included higher education. We have also included the public funded institutions, and private institutions here are not covered. Okay? Private institutions are not covered. Please remember that. Okay, there is no restriction on the private educational institutions to reserve seats for the EWS. This is even important for your prelims examination. So, for private educational institutions, for schools, it is important for elementary education students to be primary and elementary education students for their seats to be reserved, right? 25% seats to be reserved for them. This is compulsory even for private. But this is not. I hope this distinction is clear. And this 16 clause 6 is for public employment, right? So, for 10%, the 10% seats will be reserved for EWS, and the method of filling those seats will be different. So, for example, if you talk about the UPSC examination also, the cutoff for prelims will be different. Then the service allocation will be different, right? The rank based service allocation, the EWS quota will require, will be able to get a better service on a lesser rank also, right? So that is there. These two articles have been amended. So please make a note. I hope the distinction between RTE and this EWS reservation is clear. RTE did make a constitutional amendment, let me tell you. It's not that RTE did not make a constitutional amendment, and I want you to tell me in the comment section what that constitutional amendment was. So, Constitutional Amendment Act, which introduced Article 21A in the Indian Constitution, which is right to education. Please tell me in the comments, right? Let's not make this a one-way street. If you are attending these lectures, it is your duty to actually be an active part of this particular endeavor that we are having, that is mains article discussion. Anyway, so now that we have understood what the constitutional prerogative is, now let's move on to what exactly has happened, that we have moved on from caste based to economic based, economic criteria based reservation. And this reservation is for the unreserved category only, right? So the reservation which is already there for the scheduled caste, for the scheduled tribe, for the other backward classes, they do not have an economic criteria. Other backward classes have the creamy layer. SCs and STs do not have a economic criteria. Here, this economic criteria applies only to the unreserved category. Please keep this in mind, and this is one of the big criticisms also of this particular act. This is a criticism also, that how come this is applicable only for the unreserved category, because even within the SCs and the STs, we are seeing that the benefits are being cornered by the people who are more advantaged, by the people who are already uplifted, right? So that is one of the aspects. Now, the third thing that you need to understand is who needs to give representation, whose responsibility it is under the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act to actually give the reservation, to actually give the affirmative action. So most people think it is just the center, but no, it is not just the center, it is the responsibility of states as well, right? So even within the state legislative assemblies, you have to have reservation. In the state public service commissions, you have to have EWS reservations. Now, I hope you are able to understand that. Now, this is very important, and in your paper, if you get a question, let's say a 15 marker on entirely this economic based reservation, economic criteria based reservation, it is then you will write the eligibility criteria. If you get a 10 marker on this, you will not have enough space. You will just write the basics, and you will move on to the this benefits, disadvantages, way forward, right? Because in 10 marker, the space is very less. These are just 2 sheets. But in a 15 marker, you can make a sun type diagram and you can just write eligibility like here. So the purpose of these classes is also to tell you how to tackle the questions in the actual examination, not just to give you information and leave you with that information, right? The purpose is also to make you able to use that information in your actual examination. So when you are making this chart, how are you supposed to make this chart? You create the sun in the middle and you create some of these rays, right? So first criteria is household income less than 8 lakh. And this I am writing exactly in the way that you will write in the examination, right? So you need to develop these skills from here only, from these classes only, right? Second is they have agricultural land less than 5 acres. Agricultural land of less than 5 acres. Then they have a house which is smaller than 1000 square feet. Genuinely, you will be able to use only these mnemonics, right? You will not be able to write entire square feet in the examination because ultimately you have to save your space and save your time as well. Then residential plot, having residential plot less than 100 yards what happened 100 yards in a municipality. A residential plot of less than 100 yards in a municipality and a residential yard of less than 200 yards in a non-notified municipal area, right? Residential yard of less than residential area land of less than 200 yards in a non-municipal area, right? So most people will just write this, maybe this and this. And the people who are able to somehow incorporate these 2 criterias, they will get some extra advantage because the examiner will see their work, right? Now, let's see the substantive part of your answer, which you need to understand first and then put it out on your sheet. Very, very important aspect. What is the significance of economically weaker section quota? See, even before, let's say, let me remove all of this. Even before seeing, what do you think can be the significance? Let's just try to chalk it down. If you just pause the video right now and think of 5 reasons why it is important that we continue the EWS reservation. Don't think about the headings, don't think about the subheadings, nothing. Just pause the video and try to think on your own. And this is not for me, this is for you, because your brain has to work. So right now you need to pause the video and then move forward after thinking about it. Okay, I hope you have paused the video and have some ideas in your mind. So the first thing that can come to my mind is reducing caste based discrimination. Reducing caste based discrimination, because ultimately what happens is that within the caste reservation, even if the people who are getting caste based reservation, they are coming to these educational institutions or these jobs, they are facing a whole lobby of upper caste people who are seeing them just as people who are there because of the reservation and not because of their talent. So if you see the IITs, etc., they also, the kind of suicides that happen, most of the suicides, majority of the suicides are done by the people who are from so-called lower castes, right? So it will reduce caste-based discrimination. That is one. Because ultimately, this EWS reservation is seen as a testing ground for people, for the government to introduce this economic criteria even in the SC and the ST reservation. Okay. So reducing caste-based discrimination is one. The second reason why it is significant is better targeting of social justice measures. Right? जितनी भी schemes हैं, जितनी भी policies हैं, if we are targeting them only to the people who are, let's say there are caste-based upliftment policies, but the people from unreserved categories who are actually very poor, they are unable to get the benefit. So better targeting of social justice measures will be there. Fine. Then third, equity in representation. When you talk about the public institutions, not educational institutions, I'm talking about public employment. So now the SCs are represented, STs are represented, OBCs are represented. What about the poor? Right? The poor need to be represented also, because it is said, you know, that poverty is the biggest ill in a society. Poverty is the biggest problem. If poverty is solved, other problems will automatically keep on being solved. So there will be equity in representation. Then what is the overall significance, further significance? That it will lead to poverty reduction eventually, because we are actually targeting the people who are actually poor. And it is a fertile pilot project, fertile pilot test to implement economic criteria in SC and ST reservation, right? Because it's high time now that the cornering of benefits that is happening needs to be stopped. So you might have thought of these kind of pointers. Now what we have to do is we have to structure them in a better manner. So to structure them in a better manner, let's see how we can present them. Okay. We can go with the social, political and economic basis, economic benefits of this particular scheme. So social basis, it will address the inequality basis on economic criteria, reduction of caste-based discrimination. So we did not do anything special over here. We just put it under a heading of social significance. If we talk about economic factors, economic significance, it has recognized the economic backwardness and it is trying to work on the economic backwardness. So this is economic significance. It creates employment for the poor. So just imagine a poor person working, for example, as a manual scavenger. And you all know that manual scavenging is not allowed legally in India. Right? Prohibition of manual scavenging has happened through an act of 2013. However, more than 80,000 manual scavengers continue to be employed. So if these manual scavengers, they might be, some of them, from the unreserved category also, they don't have the education, they don't have the reservation also, so their kids, maybe a 50-year-old manual scavenger, his or her daughter might be 15 years old or something, right, just about to enter the college system, है ना, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में पढ़ाई करी, आरटी के अंडर पढ़ाई तो कर ली, but then eventually you have to go to college and you don't have a caste certificate, but then you do have some of the benefits of EWS criteria. So you're able to at least enter the college system. And once you enter the college system, you open some streams for you. And that is how social justice works. Okay. So employment is created and eventually financial assistance is also given. Because, you know, as I talked about getting better criteria of social welfare schemes. So economic assistance, financial assistance is also given. Polity, it fulfills the directive principles of state policy because Article 39 Clause B and Article 39 Clause C talk about minimization of inequalities that are existing in the society, and inequalities right now in the globalized atmosphere are based on economic criteria. I'm not saying they're not based on caste-based criteria. Caste is a unique phenomena that India sees. However, the economic criteria cannot be ruled out. Then empowering economically weaker sections, how? By political representation. By political representation. So for example, right now the Panchayati Raj institutions and the urban local bodies, municipalities, etc., they are having compulsory provisions of reserving seats for SCs and STs according to their population. Right? The state government has to do that. Similarly, when it comes for EWS also, they will be able to start participating. So even just think about people like a cobbler. Think about people like a cobbler. And when we see these people, we are not able to see how their future generations will work. If the reservation aspect is removed, and if this cobbler is not from a reserved category, है ना, SC or ST category, even the children of this cobbler will end up being just cobblers in this business only, right, in this profession only. But if they have some kind of upliftment mechanism, they can actually do something better, right? Then they'll be able to get education also, because under Article 15 Clause 6, they are having reservation in public institutions. So these are the significance. I hope you can relate to it. I hope you can understand that it is not about providing reservation to one generation and then getting done with it. It takes generations to get out of the cycle of poverty. Just think about something like COVID-19. If you see COVID-19, it pushed so many people back into poverty because people's out-of-pocket expenditure is very high. And here I'd like to ask you in the comments, please tell me in the comments how much is our out-of-pocket expenditure in India. We have talked about this in an earlier lecture when we were talking about the healthcare sector of India, right? So out-of-pocket expenditure, how much is it? If 100 rupees are spent on treatment, how much of that money does a person have to shed out from his own pocket? And then you will understand why and how poverty is such a big disease. The biggest disease that exists is poverty, right? So now I have already told you that the Supreme Court has actually accepted the relevance of this particular constitutional amendment. So very first thing that it has said is that it is not a breach of the basic structure of the constitution, because Article 15 and 16 both have provisions for the affirmative action for the weaker sections of the society, socially and educationally backward classes, SEBCs, right? So it's not a breach of basic structure. Then affirmative action can have various bases to it. It is not necessary that affirmative action will forever be provided on the basis of caste only. It can be provided on the basis of economic criteria as well. Then poorer section has to be focused upon. Till what time in our country will we be comfortable with seeing beggars on the streets? Till what time in our country we will be comfortable in seeing these kind of scenarios where people and their children and their families are just in that loop of poverty and they're unable to get out? We as a society have become comfortable with these scenes, wherein people are poor, they are begging, they are selling some small things on the traffic signal. We are okay with it. But till what time, right? India will not become a developed country on the shoulders of people who themselves are overburdened by poverty. Okay? Then, this is a very important observation that Supreme Court itself made, considering that the earlier judgment, Indira Sahni judgment, was also given by Supreme Court. This is a very important thing. So Indira Sahni judgment, you all know, was in the context of the Mandal Commission recommendations implementation, where 27% of the seats were reserved for the other backward classes. So at that point, Indira Sahni judgment mein, Supreme Court had made it clear that there cannot be more than 50% reservation overall. So out of 100 seats, not more than 50 seats can be reserved for any category. However, now Supreme Court has accepted that this ceiling limit is not inflexible. That means it is Supreme Court's prerogative to actually change this particular ceiling and not change, sorry. It is Supreme Court's prerogative to give legitimacy to the center's decision that it wants to reserve the seats for the economically weaker section. And overall, it has also said that EWS is not a separate category, but it is a category within the unreserved category itself, right? So we are not expanding the 50% as such. We are just diluting the we are just strengthening the unreserved category social welfare as well by the EWS. Now, as a good aspirant, you should also be knowing and writing the challenges. So just again pause your video. Let me just bring a blank screen and just be true to yourself. Okay, this is a blank screen. Pause your video, just make a sun type diagram like this and see what are the challenges that you can think of. Okay. I hope you have paused the video and then you are moving forward with it. So what are the challenges? The challenges, first of all, are that we already talked about the socio-economic caste census. We have data related to SCs and STs. The data related to OBCs, talks about that are also in the offing, that we now will be having a caste, the SECC for overall OBCs as well. So, but for the poor as such, within the general category, there is unavailability of data because the poverty line also, although it is finalized, Tendulkar committee poverty line we do follow, but then there are various measures of poverty, and how do we include that? We don't have a data set right now. Okay. How do we know that someone who is having less than 8 lakh ki household income falls into the poor category? Because you know, the income tax limit is also 2.25 lakh. So if someone is earning 2.25 lakh, they are exempted for earning equal to or less than 2.25 lakh, they're exempted from paying the income tax. So when this limit is so low, why have we kept the 8 lakh limit overall? Right? We did keep the 8 lakh limit for the OBCs, yes, but did we just copy paste from the OBC reservation to the EWS reservation? No. You should not be doing that. So it just gives laziness of this entire process, that you did not try to find out which are the weakest of the weaker sections. Even 8 lakh per year as a household income is not very less, right? Might not make you very poor, especially in rural areas, right? It's arbitrary criteria. Then economically, there's of course issue with income criteria. It will also create a financial burden on the states, and state governments who already are overburdened debt wise, who already are having major issues when it comes to giving affirmative action. They will have to create this entire infrastructure for the EWS reservation, and this will reduce their independence. Then statewide disparity is there. So when we talk about states like Goa, in Goa, the per capita income is about 4 lakh rupees. 4 lakh per person per annum, which is way more than what it is in states like Bihar, right? So in states like Bihar, the per capita income would be somewhere about 40,000 per year, which is very less. So the states also will not be able to justify. Then political or judicial implications are that it is an Orwellian exclusion. What is Orwellian exclusion? That it depends on the state. It is basically state के mood पे है कि state को किस basis पे देना है, right? Orwellian comes from the term George Orwell, who talked about how state goes on to achieve a surveillance model, right? And it just does what it wants to do. It just keeps on, not taking any inputs from the citizens and just imposing what it wants to impose on the citizens. That is an Orwellian state, right? So when we see this kind of exclusion for the people, we see that this is an Orwellian exclusion. So that is problematic. It can also come off as a tool of populism, right? So we can see, just a second. Okay. We can also see that these kind of measures can be given by states when there are elections coming up. These kind of measures can also be given by the government when they want to attain votes, etc. So these become populist measures. That is also a problem. And overall, there is narrow scope, and it is based on minority view of Supreme Court also, right? So it is not something that will hold ground, that might hold ground, because affirmative action in India was always supposed to be given on caste basis. Now it is being given on economic basis, and how sustainable it is not very clear, right? When we talk about the social aspect, there is lack of level playing field overall when it comes to the SCs, STs, OBCs, and the unreserved category. The discrimination faced by the SCs, STs, and OBCs is something that unreserved category cannot understand, right? Then there is confusion and complexity. There is limited coverage and inadequate awareness to the real poor who have to get benefits out of this. And the implementation of this particular aspect will also be difficult. So now let's come on to the way forward. When we talk about the way forward, we need to give very simple yet very effective suggestions when it comes to the economically weaker section reservation. So there need to be clear guidelines to identify the intended beneficiaries. How are you supposed to identify the intended beneficiaries? So criteria is clear, but guidelines should also be there. Are you going to identify on the basis of their just their income or this, or you'll conduct a survey? What will you do? Then make the scheme inclusive. Eventually move to include the poorest of poor of SCs, STs and OBCs also in this particular scheme. Justify the income criteria. Just because 8 lakh per annum worked for the OBCs does not mean it will work for the unreserved category as well. It needs to be continuously evolved. This particular criteria, this particular reservation system needs to be continuously evolved, and in fact 103rd constitutional amendment is also a way to evolve this only. Then we have to keep on expanding our employment so that the need for reservation keeps on reducing, because the race for government jobs is such that it will never end if we don't expand employment in other sectors. And finally, education has to be improved. So that's all for this lecture. I hope you gained some value out of it. 103rd constitutional amendment remains to be very, very important. I did ask you 2 questions to mention in the comment section. Your queries about the notes also I have addressed in the starting part of the video, so you can go back and just see what I have told you, and I will see you all in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.